After my family's test drive of the new Prado 250, and in our last video we weighed up all the specifications of the new Prado and also its competitors, we are now moving into the cost part of our justification as to whether or not we can justify purchasing a Prado 250 upgrading from our older Prado 150. So today's video is first going to dive into the comment section and see what you guys have to say about the price of the new Prado 250, and then we're going to crunch some numbers of Prados over the last 20 years and have a look and see if the price hikes have actually been warranted and maybe some of the reasons why the new Prado is as expensive as it is right now. So we are diving into the comment section with the first comment from De-Atomizer, saying the following: not worth the upgrade, not at the ridiculous price Toyota is asking, you are much better off with an Everest. My son works for Toyota and he brought one home for us to look at. I have to say, it looks really nice at first glance. After a bit of a closer look, I noticed the dash is loose in places and the motor is very underpowered. So this is a comment that it sums up a little bit of what a number of other commenters have been saying, where they're not very happy with the specs on the weight, because as we went through in our last video, if you want to have a look and see all the detailed specs, I put together a whole spreadsheet of a whole variety of not only the Prado 250 specs, but also a variety of other vehicles in the same class. And we took a very deep dive into those specs in that video. But, a big, criticism of the new Prado is that it is, kind of putting out the same sort of power, same sort of engine, same engine, and yet the weight is even more than what it was in the Prado 150. So how are we going to expect it to perform better than a 150 if it's using the same engine, is putting out the same power, yet it's heavier with this 48 volt system? And a few people have been commenting as well on the quality of the interior and some of the specs. Because there's a huge number of variants in the lineup, people are finding many and various different things about each of the variants of the Prado. So for us, one of the things that we're struggling with at the moment is, which spec do we choose? Like, which variant do we choose in the Prado lineup? Because there's like 6. So it's trying to figure out as well which vehicle has kind of the best build quality, because all the interiors are different, and each of the vehicles has its pros and cons all the way through the Prado 250 lineup. Brian Clark 1695 has the following to say: overpriced, overweight, underpowered, no long-range tank, no space for a second battery, and that silly boot space arrangement, a total disaster. Toyota have forgotten what people buy Prados for. That is for adventure, four-wheel drive, touring, towing, the caravan or boat. Dealers must be fuming. What was a good earner for them is now just a lemon. Just for interest, 18,000 Australian dollars cheaper in New Zealand, and no doubt other countries. Also, other countries get the no hybrid option, which a lot of you guys have been commenting in the comments in our previous videos, that where you live in different parts of the world, you have the no hybrid option. Interesting. And also other countries get the no hybrid option. Toyota should have reworked that engine for more power and made it cleaner. My 2023 150 series is a winner compared to this 250 abomination. So again, a lot of likes on that comment too. So again, people are thinking the same sort of thing. We'll move on to the last of our comments now, which is from James M6341. 27,000 new Prados allocated for Australia and 17,000 already ordered. Main problem for many people is the cost. 2025 might be the best year to buy a Prado 150 at a reasonable price. Well, James, I think that could go a couple of different ways. I think that maybe what could happen is that the older Prado 150s become more desirable because they're a bit more practical, don't have as much technology in them. I never thought I would say that a Prado has less technology than other vehicles, but who would have thought? Another thing that was quite interesting is that he mentioned that 17,000 have already been ordered, but something we need to consider as well is that there are also a lot of people that are cancelling their orders. People are ordering the Prados thinking that it was, especially like before it came out, they chucked the $500-ish on their Prado order just to allocate one, just to get their name on one. They get it delivered and they're not happy with it, so they let go of the allocation. So what could actually happen is possibly the Prado 250s could actually go down in price if there's a lot of orders and the dealers are left with a whole bunch of these Prados. So it'd be interesting to see what the next 6 months holds for the Toyota dealerships with the Prado 250s. And we'll see, I guess, how that kind of affects the prices of the older outgoing 150s but also how it affects the price of the new 250s. So with our comment section out of the way, it's now time for our deep dive into the pricings of the Prado over the last 20-ish years, and it's going to be a bit of a deep dive, so strap yourselves in, folks. It's going to be a bumpy ride. So first of all, when we started looking at the Prados, probably one of the first things that we noticed was the shape of it. We actually really liked the shape of it. I actually didn't in my first video that I made. I think it was at the end of last year. I wasn't really too sold on the whole, look of it. But as time has gone on, I'll be the first one to admit that I really, now that I see them driving around, I really do like the look of them, especially in that Lexus variant with the kind of sandy taupe color. I really do like the look of that. However, the next thing that shocked us and that caught our attention was actually the price. So the price of the new Prado 250s, tops out at a little bit over 100 grand, and then well over 100 grand when you add on the drive away cost. So that then led me down a bit of a rabbit hole thinking of, well, if it was over about 100K here now in today's money and 2025 money, what were the original Prados like 20 years ago? What were some of the Prado 120s selling for? And what was our wage looking like back then? So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into that now, starting off with some figures. So we're winding back the clock to 2005 when, fun fact, Batman Begins was released, and you could actually go and buy a Prado 120, and my research tells me that the top spec back then was the Pilbara spec, and it came in at a price of $50,910, so basically $51,000. Now, the prices that I'm going to be going through all today are not drive away prices. These are all just like the retail prices. So before you add on all of the government charges, etc. So we're looking at, for our first example, we're taking it in lots of decades. So a couple of decades ago in 2005, we're at around $51,000. So then in 2015, when Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars came out, fun fact for you again, the popular Prado 150 came in Kakadu form, which was its highest variant. And it was now $84,490. So now that we're in 2025, you get the Prado 250 Kakadu and the Altitude, they're around 100 grand. So it's $99,990. So effectively, the Prado over the last 20 years has essentially doubled in price. Now you guys are probably thinking, well, Mark, 20 years ago, 50 grand is probably around 100 grand in today's money. Well, yes and no, and there's a couple of things that we're going to be talking about as this video goes on that might help explain the disparity in the figures that we have here. So throwing in $50,910 into the RBA calculator spits out $86,931. So there's about 13 grand between the cost of the new Prado top spec compared to where the inflation says that it should be. So now the question is, well, where does that 13 grand come from? Where are we seeing that extra 13 grand? So we're going to just put that on pause and stick that to the side just for a minute. Okay, so we're just going to put that off to the side because we'll be coming back to that. So the next thing, my next train of thought was that, well, if the cost of the vehicle is, okay, so say 13-ish grand, which is still a lot of money, but it's not that far off inflation when we start adding in some of the other things we're going to talk about in a second. So that then got me thinking, well, why do we then think that the new Prados are so expensive? What is it that makes us look at the cost of the new Prado and think this is more money than I'm comfortable parting with, and I'm going to keep my old vehicle? Because in the comment section, guys, you've been telling me, keep the Prado 150. Don't bother spending all this extra cash. Because guys, at the end of the day, if we trade in our Prado, even if we get like top dollar for it, we're probably still going to be out of pocket like 40-ish grand. It's just the way it goes, So, and that 40 grand is a lot of money. That's like a really nice FJ Cruiser or something you could have as an extra vehicle. That's what I have. So, it gives you a bit of an idea that you could have a lot of fun with that 40 grand, or you could use a portion of that to make your current vehicle, keep it up to date. Chuck some new suspension into it. Give it a really good service, whatever it is. Give it a tune, exhaust, snorkel, whatever. So that 40 grand will get you pretty far. So it did get me thinking though, what makes that Prado for us a really expensive vehicle now? So we're going to have a look at something here, and it's got to do with our wages. It's got to do with the average wage, because if we think something's expensive, it's because we are taking our own financial scenarios, our own personal situations, and we're applying it to seeing if I can actually purchase this vehicle or not. So that's when I started looking for some calculators. I started looking for some sort of source that would give us some sort of figure on an annual wage. So I found, and I have used this before with other projects, but it's called Statista, and it just basically gives us an average annual wage over the last 20 years. So what we're looking at is in 2005, the average annual wage, according to Statista, was $79,718, so around 80 grand. But in the most recent wage calculation it has, the average wage was around that $91,000. And it's kind of like up and down over the last couple years. So I don't think that a year or two is going to make that much of a difference in that average wage. So now remember back to when we said that the inflation had gone up and made the Prado so expensive. Well, the percentage that we used for that was around 67% over the last 20 years. But when we have a look at our average wage, the average wage has only increased by 14.2%. So now we have a look at the new Prados as being as expensive as they are, when they have increased in price, even just by inflation of 67%. But our average annual wage has only gone up by 14-ish%. So it's very reasonable to have a look at new cars and think, well, that's a lot more money than I'm prepared to part with, because back in 2005, our average wage the annual wage was much higher than the purchase cost of the then new Prado 120. So let's have a look now at an ideal world where the average wage increase was at the same rate of the inflation, okay? And at the top of the range Prado, and we are going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but it's still interesting to talk about, from my perspective anyway. So let's look at an ideal world where if the average wage increased at the same rate of the inflation, which was 67%, and the top of the range Prado was listed at the maximum inflated price. So the wages then, our wages, would actually be $133,447. So we're looking at a little over 130K. And the top of the range Prado should really only be around $87,000. So now we're talking about, put that into today's money and you put that into perspective, all of a sudden the Prado is not looking too expensive. So that's kind of a little bit of a dive into some of the reasons why we think that the new Prado is expensive. It's because it's worth more than our average annual wage. It's pretty much it. Like back in 2005, our average wage was much higher than the purchase price of a new Prado. So that for me is one of the big takeaways that I found just by crunching a few numbers and looking at a few of these online calculators and some of these online financial resources. So for the final part of this video, we're going to be doing a little bit of speculation as to why we think the price disparity between the cost of a brand new top of the range Prado and the inflated cost of the Prado 120 20 years ago, why we think, where has that 13 grand come from? So in my, I guess from my research and from looking at comments and also just, using a little bit of common sense, I've come up with the following list, and I'd love it if you guys could add anything in the comment section to this list, because I'd love to circle back to this topic as well, because it is a very interesting topic. So the wages not keeping up with inflation obviously was a big one. So we covered that already, but it is something to consider, that why we think that the Prado is so expensive is because of the wages. Doesn't explain that 13 grand though in the disparity between the inflated cost of the Prado 20 years ago and the cost of the Prado now. So what does explain it? Well, one of the things is the uncomplicated emissions tech. So, things like catalytic converters, DPFs, AdBlue, all this stuff, it adds equipment, it adds sensors, it adds computers, it adds cost. So is that 13 grand worth of cost? Well, guys, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know that. You could maybe, again, speculate in the comment section, but I would say it would be worth quite a bit of money. And also add in some of the safety technology as well, which I didn't have on my list, but it makes sense, is that if you've got all these parking sensors and you've got all these radar detectors, you got your cruise controls, you got all these things that beep at you all the time, like all that stuff has to cost money, right? So, you've got Apple CarPlays in your cars now. You've got, and that tech might be more expensive than, say, the equivalent of what was in the Prado 120 20 years ago. So that again is something to consider, safety tech and emissions tech. So I'm gonna throw something on the wall here and see what sticks, because I think that financing has something to do with the cost of new prices, and that people aren't going out as much these days compared to 20 years ago. People aren't going out and spending their cash on a new vehicle. And I'm not saying it's everyone, I'm just saying on average, I would say that more people are going for the financing route now as opposed to, saving up and outlaying the cash at the dealership desk. Now, that could have something to do with the overall price of the vehicles, because if people are just, paying off these vehicles every week and they never own the vehicle, it's just kind of constantly just paying it, and then after a few years, they trade up. The overall purchase price of the vehicle probably doesn't have as much of a bearing on their financials. So people might be, if they say the rates are really reasonable and, they only have to pay, like Toyota Access, for example, you can get, say, a $100,000 car for $250 a week. People will be more than happy to pay that, so they might not be as likely to save up 100 grand and pay with their own money. I think that if the whole financing structures that exist within the vehicle manufacturers now and the dealerships now, if that didn't exist, I think that we would see prices of vehicles a lot lower, because people are saving up and spending the cash that they have saved up over the last however many years to purchase the vehicle. And I don't think that there will be as many new vehicle sales if it wasn't for the structure of the finances from there, and that the whole, pay as you go sort of a situation, and the whole, Toyota Access sort of thing. I think that not as many people, and I don't think that they would be selling as many cars if they didn't have that finance structure. Now, last one again is a speculation. It's something that I have come across in other people's comments as well, and it's got to do with manufacturers maximizing profits. I mean, it's been big news over the last, it's been big news over the last couple years, a few years actually, where, the price of things just keep going up and up and up. And it's like, well, if like inflation's only going up by like 2.7% on average every year, why are the cost of just standard everyday goods going up so rapidly? And it's then brings in the question, well, companies are taking advantage. Some companies are having, record-breaking profit years. So is it that the manufacturers are just taking advantage of the fact that they can actually just charge more for their products? I don't know. Like, that's for you guys to decide. But it is definitely a consideration that I wanted to just throw out again at the wall and see what stuck. Because it's like, if we take all of this into consideration, it probably all explains, and it probably all has something to do with a little bit of a piece of the pie of that 13 grand, that if that top of the range 2005 120 Pilbara was inflated to, the $86,000 or whatever it was that we had on there, that probably explains that 13 grand price disparity. So it is all interesting food for thought. And like I said, it's all just speculation. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section, and if I missed anything in this little last section here of this speculation breakdown. So after having a look at the price of the new Prado 250, where does that leave me and my family in the conversation for the new Prado and upgrading from our Prado 150? Well, it's, I think, become pretty clear and pretty obvious to me and my family that we don't want to get the top of the range Prado. Although it's always nice to think about getting the top of the range of anything, I always have believed that the best value for any vehicle lies at the base model or very close to the base model of the range of the variants. As an example, I've pretty much almost always owned the bottom or close to the bottom of the range of vehicles. I had a Mitsubishi Lancer for my first car. It was the bottom of the range one. It wasn't the VRX, it wasn't the Evolution, it was the base model ES. You know, I had a Nissan Navara, next one. You know, it was a D22 Nissan Navara, basic of the basics. You know, I had a Prado, brand new Prado, and that was a GXL. So not the very, very bottom, but pretty close to the bottom. Probably the only like top of the range, I guess, vehicle I've ever bought was my Hilux Rogue. And because it had so many things on it that I just realized that, listen, top of the range isn't really for me. I loved my Hilux Rogue, don't get me wrong. It wasn't really as designed for that really tough off-roading as I thought it was after I took it up to the Cape. And I pretty quickly realized that the value lies more in the bottom or closer to the bottom of the range of the vehicle. So you want to get all of the good stuff that the higher variants have, but you really want to have the same transmission, you want to have the same motor, and you want to have it for like the very, very closest to the bottom price that you can put up with. And also like your seats and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's not going to be as nice, so you just have to see what your tolerance is. So that's what we're going to be doing next. You know, me and my family, we're going to be having a look at the different variants of the Prado 250, and we're going to be comparing them and seeing kind of where our tolerance lies in terms of being able to get the closest to the bottom of the range. That's our opinion at this point in time. We're just going to see kind of how that GX looks, how does the GXL look, you know, maybe how does the VX look and where that sits. And to do that, we're going to do a very detailed comparison of the specifications of all of the variants in the Prado range. So make sure that you guys stick around for that, and until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. See you down in the comment section. Can't wait to see what you guys have to think about today's video. See you down there.